video will work. There we go. So first I wanted to recap from last week all the things that we learned in the post lesson when we talked about publishing. Just a quick 5-second little recap just in case this helps jog any more questions that you guys had. Number one, you can publish independently or traditionally. Traditionally is typically easier because of the fact they market the book for you, they pay for the editor for you, they pay for the art for you.
However, it's
However,
harder to get to.
it is harder to get to. Yes, querying takes a long time, a lot of work, and can sometimes be very exhausting.
And then even then, there's a chance you won't get it.
Yes, exactly. And then even then there's a chance that you won't be able to get someone to actually say yes when you're querying. That's what
Yeah.
the beauty of agents is for, is that then you can query to get an agent and then the agent does all of the sluggish work of asking all the publishers for you. And you're more likely because people take you a little more seriously when you have an agent.
You know how hard it is to do a Latin publishing.
Most places that you have seen in a book that is popular are probably pretty hard, unfortunately, because that means they are very well established. If it's
Yeah.
like a book that you've never heard of, then it might actually be super easy because they're probably a little itty bitty baby press. And you're like, oh, you're such a cute little publishing company. Let me. But if it's something that has some pretty hefty big titles to it that you know are New York Times best or better, you're probably going to have a hard time getting in without an agent. Now, does that mean you can't? Absolutely not. But it does mean it will be hard. The competition will be incredibly stiff. Ah, the doors. Door. Hello. Please close the door behind me. Technically, I did, but that's okay because I'm doing a question and answer thing today. So, nice and easy. Yesterday, as I was just telling them, I was super tired, and so instead of planning a lesson, I fell asleep. So we decided to do question and answer today. Last week, we also talked a lot about having different questions about publishing. So as a result, I'm going over those questions that we had from last week, so we can have those answers at least covered. We also talked about, do you need an editor in order to effectively get traditionally published? No, you don't. However, you do need a really good team of beta readers. And when I say beta readers, I don't just mean people being like, "Woo, your book is awesome." People being like, "This scene serves no function, delete it." Like they need to actually give you good critiques and good help on your writing. I mean, yes, it's good to have some cheerleaders. Yes, it's good to have those people cheering you on, but you, sorry, buddy, this needs to be fixed. If you don't have anyone like that, then yes, it would be a great idea to pay a professional editor to help give it that extra polish before you give it to querying. Now, that being said, just because you have a professional editor edit it does not mean that your editor won't have new stuff when you do traditionally publish it, because they typically have their own things that they like to do, whether it's make it shorter, make it longer, whether they have specific things that they like to cater to, or specific audiences, or even just specific preferences. So just because you hire an editor and then get traditionally published, that does not mean that your editor will not continue to have opinions. Um, then you also have independent publishing, which is harder because you have to do all the marketing yourself, do all of the selling of the books yourself, which does cost money. Get an editor for yourself, and yes, you do have to get an editor for yourself. Even if you're doing a children's book, I would recommend it because there are some times when you just don't see what other people will see. And then beyond that, you also have to get your own book cover. Who knows what they're doing. And I like to specify that who knows what they're doing, because even if you know a fantastic artist, that does not mean they know how to make a wraparound cover with the appropriate titling and all that kind of stuff. There is actually a very specific way to do all those kinds of things, and blurry and bad if they don't know how to do it in the right rendering and etc. So, unfortunately, they do need to actually know what they're doing, which means it's going to cost a little more. And if you don't know how to format your book in proper book formatting, you will also need to hire a formatter or learn how to format, which can take a long time. But not impossible. So, those are some of the questions we talked about last week. Oh, the last one was, is it necessary to get an agent? No. But if you want to have an easier time dealing with less rejection letters and ultimately potentially even getting paid more because they will negotiate a higher salary for you, get an agent. It's a good idea. um, all right, moving forward. Any other questions you guys have about publishing or editing or book cover design? Any of that?
For me, that's not an issue because I'm doing Pokemon
That's
stuff.
fair. You're like, I'm doing fan fiction, not a problem. Fair enough.
The reason I wasn't here last week
Mhm.
was because it was I had to help my parents with the yard.
That's okay.
My siblings were not there. I was really tired after.
You're totally fine. I get it.
It was
Sometimes we have
very hot.
busy weeks. Oh no, yeah, it's been super hot the last couple of days for sure. But yeah, any questions about editors, publishing, or agents? Where can you find an agent? That's a great question. I would have to look up the specific websites because of the fact that I don't want to accidentally give you the wrong website name. But there are tons of different websites that actually help direct you to different agents. About some of these websites is that they will even give you a little rundown of their bio, which is things like I love romance, but I hate horror, or things like that. And so if you're doing a horror book, don't ask them. Like it gives you a lot of good tips and tricks, and it'll even say things about like I'm looking for younger authors, or I'm looking for older female authors, or all these different things, so you can know their preferences of authors they would like to represent, books they would like to represent, and publishing companies that they have good relationships with. So if you're like, I want to get into Aladdin or I want to get into Shadow Mountain or something like that, look for agents that specifically say, I have contacts here, because that will get more likely guaranteed in there because that means they frequently know and spend time with the editors and publishers there, so they're more likely to be able to persuade them to take on the book. So long and the short of it is after the lesson, I will make sure to pull that list up and make sure to get that for you guys. And I will try to link it onto the bottom of the video, a bunch of different links for the websites, because there are some really great websites for looking for an agent. And it also typically discusses their process, what things they may or may not say yes to, why they might reject a book, different things like that. So that way you can kind of know in advance what the answer is probably going to be and why.
What book are you
All right.
Pokemon.
Other questions?
Pokemon.
He's writing a Pokemon fan fiction. All right. Any other questions about editing, publishing, agents, etc. before we move on to another topic of question?
This book was
No?
really
All good?
small enough to put here.
And then you're like, massive book. All right. Any other questions about that? We're good for Sable? Archer, any questions? Are you good? I will assume that we are good. And if you come up with something else, we can address it later. Okay.
I'm not good.
Do you guys have any questions about plotting out your novel or lack thereof if you are not a plotter? Plotting. Well, you did just say you were evil, so plotting and evil villainy goes together well. That makes sense. Any questions about plotting or, like I said, lack thereof? Some people aren't plotters. Some people just are like characters, do a thing, and the characters do the things.
So, how do you make like a good villain or whatever?
That is a great question too. Side
I know a
tangent.
good program that's good for writing. There's National Novel Writing Month.
Mhm.
NaNoWriMo.
They're a lot of fun. But anyway, back on topic with villains and
How do you
arch
make
enemies.
a good like antagonist?
So typically,
It talks about
an
that, that's what I'm saying.
antagonist. So typically, an antagonist and a villain are actually can be two separate things. An antagonist is just someone who goes against the main character.
But a
The
villain
villain is evil.
Evil, truly, actually evil.
But an
Like-
antagonist is just someone that gets in their way.
Exactly. They could be a
Because,
henchman.
it could
They could just be someone who doesn't get along well with them. Heck, they could even be a sibling who's just like, I dislike you, so I'm gonna be annoying. Like,
Umbridge, but some people
yes,
say
or like Umbridge. She's not the villain, but she is definitely an antagonist. She gets in their way.
like villains are like take over the world,
Kill people, destroy
yeah,
things, that kind of stuff.
and antagonists can villains villains are antagonists, but not all antagonists are villains.
Put it. So with antagonist, I would typically say you've got to identify what the main character's goals are, and especially what their main goal is, because they may have lots of goals. I know, for example, with Harry, going back to Harry Potter, his main goal is to just go through school and be a normal wizard person. However,
Normal and wizard don't exactly go together.
that's why I said normal wizard person. But anyway, moving forward,
Hogwarts, normal students are wizards or witches.
that's my point. So, with that being said, he just wants to be your average wizard, as average as he can be. However, the villain automatically is against him because of the fact that he sees him as the only thing standing between him and eternal immortal takeover. And so unfortunately that is going to get in his way of wanting to be a normal kid because he sees him as his arch rival, right? Then you also have antagonists like Draco Malfoy who just want to get in his way and be a pest because of the fact that he kind of sees Harry as the one thing that is preventing his parents from being happy. They're upset because Voldemort's not in power, and he's not in power anymore because of Harry. And so as a result, he gets in his way and causes all sorts of mayhem all of the time because he ultimately blames his parents' unhappiness on Harry. That being said, what makes a good antagonist is being able to identify those goals and identifying why they want to stop them. Don't just have it be flat like they want to stop them because they want to stop them. That's not a reason. However, if they want to stop them because they're jealous, or they want to stop them because they believe they are a bad person, or because if they succeed, they will lose something very important to them. Those are all good reasons to be an antagonist. Or they just don't like them as a person.
So they just try.
Typically, though, with that, I would say there is a reason why people dislike people. It's never just I dislike you just because. It's I dislike you because.
That, but
I would say that
very rare.
as someone who very much appreciates psychology and looking into things, there is never just they hate them because they hate them. I can see why you say it is because it's very rare, but typically that just means they aren't in tune with whatever's about that person. There is still a reason. The main character just might not know it. Now that is very much true. They may not know why they're pissed off. They may not know why this person angers them so much. But there is still a reason, and you as a writer should, if the character themselves doesn't know it. The character might just be like, oh, I just hate them because they're the worst. And you might, as an author, though, know, oh, they hate them because they remind them of this younger sibling who absolutely and utterly, like, abused them as a child or something like that. In that case, then you can be like, oh, you know why, even if the main character has yet to do the work and dig deep enough psychologically to figure that out. But as an author, it is your job to know that, whether or not the characters want to tell you. You get to be the pest who's like, guess what? You have to tell me all your secrets. And the character's like, never. And you're like, time to discover it anyway. With villains, typically you want you have two types of human villains. Let's specify that. Because you can have the classic Mother Nature. Yeah, you can't have the classic kind of Mother Nature abstract villain where it's like an earthquake happens and that causes everything to be apocalyptic, you know? Or zombies where it's like they don't really have a motive aside from brains, you know? And it's like that's not really a motive. That's just kind of more like I said, Mother Nature, where it's like there isn't really a true motive. It just happens to you. Or like a tsunami or things like that. Those are more abstract villains. But
zombies are basically just doing what their instinct.
Exactly. They're instinctual villains. They're no different than an earthquake quaking because that's what it's supposed to do. Like,
Just-
Quaking because the earth quakes.
exactly.
Just because
Like-
just because of all the science behind it.
Exactly. And so just because of the fact that you don't necessarily know does not mean that there isn't something. Anyway, moving forward. With villains, with human villains, there are typically two types of villains. There's the megalomaniac who literally their only purpose in life is to get as much power as possible. They don't care who they kill, they don't care who they have to get rid of, they don't care who they step on, they don't care about anyone's feelings, they don't care about loved ones. They honestly probably don't have any loved ones. They just want to take over the world and get as much power as possible.
Become the dominant person.
Yes, become in charge. That is a lot more like megalomania, getting into the whole like ego. They get really, really intense about they think they truly are the best, and that if they ruled the world, it would all be all better and it would be perfect. That is typically the motivation there. Whether or not they're right is totally different, but that's typically their motivation. Then you have the other type of villain. This is when they are trying to genuinely do something good, but they are going about it the wrong way. For example, this might be something like the Spider-Man Into the Multiverse, if you've seen that. If you haven't, I'm going to quickly explain. The very first movie, they have Kingpin, right? And Kingpin's whole thing is I'm trying to open a dimensional door in the multiverse so I can see my family again. That is a very sweet, wholesome goal. However, he also doesn't care if the whole multiverse gets ripped apart and everyone dies to see his family again. And so that's where he becomes a villain, not
He just
because of
cares
his
about
motives.
family a lot.
Exactly.
He also wants
He's not a
revenge on
bad
Spider-Man.
person. He does want revenge on Spider-Man because he believes it was his fault. And so as a result, that doesn't make him a bad person. That makes him human. There are lots of people I know who would do anything to get their family members back, right? Like it sucks to lose your family members. And it really sucks. But at the same time, going through something that's going to make a ton of other people lose their family members and lose their lives in order to get yours back, that's when you start moving into villain territory. When you stop caring about other people and only care about yourself and what you need, that's when you start having villain problems. So that there's the main two types of human villains. You have the relatable, has a good purpose behind it, but doesn't necessarily go about it the right way, and sometimes loses their humanity. And then you have the other kind, which is just classic megalomaniac, kind of Joker-esque, like take over the world, mwahaha, like type of person. Yes, exactly. Or like Voldemort. Voldemort's very much a just like, I don't care who I have to kill, who I have to maim, who I have to injure. Yes, Drago Bloodfist is also very much that, where it's just like murder, murder, kill, don't care who, power is best. So with that, it's really the motivation that gives the best thing.
There's
Yeah.
some kind of like subcategories. Not
There are
really-
subcategories, absolutely.
like just people who just don't really have a good purpose, just like a bully at school or whatever.
Yeah.
That's an antagonist.
Yeah.
They're not like want absolute power.
But they do want minor power. Power within that school, maybe. Power
Yeah.
over their life.
or just trying to make other people feel weak.
Yeah, exactly. Because that makes them feel powerful by making other people feel weak. It's an unfortunate circumstance of humanity, but we want to feel powerful. We want to be awesome. And it's sad because we can't just be, well, a lot of people can't. Some people can. But a lot of people feel like they can't just be good. They can't just be good enough just existing. They have to be legendary. They have to be powerful. They have to be the boss. They have to be the this or that. And it's like, okay, do you have to do that in order to be a good person? No, you don't. But I think a lot of people get it in their minds that if you aren't this CEO or you aren't the president of the United States or you aren't the king, then somehow you're not good enough. And it's really sad.
To be like recognized and remembered, or like
Yes, the
have a
idea
high
that you have to be
title.
remembered.
High title, so then they
And wanting to be remembered isn't a problem.
Right, but it's how you go about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I thank you for mentioning that. Wanting to be remembered not an issue. However, if you're so obsessed with it that that's the only thing that matters in life, that's a problem.
That's a problem for
That's
you
concerning.
and for other people.
Exactly. It's like, okay, then now you have a problem. But yeah, that would be my best advice is for antagonists, make sure you know what is bugging them and what is making them stand in the protagonist's way. Whether it's good, bad, or even if they don't know it themselves. Even if they're just like, oh, I hate this person just because I hate this person. Well, what do you think makes them actually hate that person? However, I will say if you are writing kids' books, like for ages, I want to say like 8 to 10 at most, you can kind of get away with the villain is just evil because they want to. Um, should you?
8 through 10, I
Yeah.
kind of feel like just kind of like 3 through like
Well,
5
technically a
or 6.
3-year-old wouldn't always.
There's that. But
carry
I would say,
the villain.
so the reason I say 8 through 10 is because that is the age category when you start reading major chapter books, and there's a lot of major chapter books that actually do have villains that are that crappy. And that's why I was going to say, do I think you should do that? No. But can you get away with it? Absolutely. Because publishers are kind of a little bit lazy when it comes through to 8 through 10-year-old readers. For some reason, they just get really lazy and they're like, oh no, there's this villain, evil hiss. And it's like, why are they evil though? And it's like, because they're evil. And it's like, okay, this is part of the reason why a lot of 8 to 10-year-old readers tend to gravitate towards more 10 to 12-year-old books because of the fact that there are some publishers that get
It's not
really lazy.
complicated.
Exactly. They make it too simple and they don't make it complicated enough to keep the readers engaged.
And that age group is not that childish.
Exactly. And yet a lot of people assume that they are that childish and it's kind
Even
of
though
not okay.
they were 8 and 10 once.
Right. And yet they assume that like, oh, I loved that when I was a kid. And it's like, did you though?
You can really only rightfully get away with that when it's like 5-year-old.
Yeah, when you're doing like beginner chapter books where it's like Susie went to the store. Susie is sad because Marcus took the last watermelon. You know, like like that kind of stuff. That's more okay because they're just barely learning how to read on their own. Like they don't want to deal with complex plots right now. They're just focusing. But once you get into 8 and 10-year-old category with it, but I don't think that means you should. Just because publishers will allow you to get away with it does not mean you should. You should write for your age group, and 8 to 10-year-olds can absolutely take on more when it comes to complex villains, and they should see those kinds of things. And I think that's why it's so important for you guys as teens and tweens to be writing because of the fact that you know what your age group wants. You know what you're looking for. You know what you want to see in a book. And so it's important that you not only vote with your dollars in what books you buy and what books you check out from the library if you don't have money, because that also tells us what books to keep buying and what books are interesting and popular. But it's also important that you, as yourselves, speak out against that by writing what you want to see. What do you want to see in a book? All right. Other questions about writing? Characters, plot, anything? Yes, question.
Is the 7-point plot structure, is that supposed to like apply to like if you're doing a series, should it like be like kind of like reset after each book, or is it like something just throughout the series?
The answer is both. Each book should have all 7 plot points. However, the overarching series should also have an overarching 7 plot points. If we had the whiteboard wall that we used to have, more in the whiteboard for a second. Moving on. I could show you better, but I could absolutely show you after this video as well. Each book should have its all 7 points, but then the overall series should also have all 7 points. Each book should take about 1 to 2 plot points per book, depending on how many books you're doing. So, for example, with Harry Potter, they did actually exactly 7 books. So as a result, each one has exactly 1 overarching series plot point in it. However, if you're doing something like a 3-book series, then you probably want to have at least 2, if not 3 plot points of the overarching series in each book. So it all depends on how many you want to have. And then if you want to go crazy and have like 24 books, then you can do like 1 point per 3 books and go crazy. But yes, it should restart. Yes, no, for sure. But some people do that, like Wheel of Time. Um, so you should do 7 plot point structure for each individual, and then have an overarching plot point for the entire thing. So both, I would say. Do you have to do that 100%? No, but I will say that most editors will want you to do it that way because of the fact that it's what most readers expect. Most readers expect a full plot within each novel as well as an overarching building plot. So most readers expect both, and as a result, it is good to give them both because that is what readers want. Now, does that mean you always have to cater to your readers? No, especially because sometimes your audience is niche and small. For example, there's this book. I would not recommend reading it because personally I don't like it, but some people like it. It's called House of Leaves. And basically the concept is the guy in the house is slowly going crazy. Hence why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. However, it actually does not even have a 7 point plot structure because it's just so insanity provoking that there is no structure. It's literally just him going mad in whatever order he wants to go mad.
Wait, what?
And so my point is, you don't necessarily have to follow plots. However, most people prefer plots. For example, that's why with House of Leaves, they only have about like maybe 200 people on the whole like planet who like that book, because it's considered artsy and abstract and weird. But most people prefer when you have a plot for your book and you aren't just dragging them through the forest willy-nilly. That was my favorite metaphor. I came up with this last week. Having a plot is when you have a hiking guide who goes like, hey, we're going to hike to this point, and then we're going to take a break and eat lunch and different things like that. And then we're going to keep hiking, and then we're going to get to this lake, and then we're going to hike back and eat dinner, and then we're going to keep hiking down the mountain, That's a plot. Whereas the abstract ones, the abstract ones are the people who just go, come on, we're going to the woods today, and drag you off into the woods. So most people don't like that. Some people do, but that is not the average. Yes, she is a human that I know. Please let her in and then close the door. Hello.
From now on, I'll be pantomiming everything you say.
Have fun with that. Nope. But there's a bunch of chairs for no reason. There's just so many chairs. Anyway, so today's just a basic question and answer lesson. So I've just been answering whatever questions come to your guys' brains. So we just finished talking about plotting and what is necessary for plotting versus what is unnecessary. Any other questions you guys have about plotting, characters, or publishing, or
So like
Fair
with
to know.
plotting,
Yes.
you want like the climax to be in the middle of your like plot point, or do you let, I don't know, is it okay if you just have like 3 plot points that like?
So typically with the 7 point plot structure, it's actually almost near the end. It's not typically in the dead center. So with the 7 point plot structure, I'm gonna hopefully get this right. If not, that's okay. You can Google it later.
I have it down.
Ah, perfect. If you'd like, you can pass that this direction because I always try to do it off of memory and I get the pinch point and the plot points mixed up. Do you want to like scoot that this direction? Awesome slide. Good job. All right. Okay. So, all right. So, with this is typically how it goes. So first, one, you have the hook. This is what draws your reader in. This puts the story into conflict. It leads their life from normal to abnormal, whatever abnormal is, whether it's an earthquake happens, zombies attack, they realize that they have superpowers, whatever it is. Then you
The
have
thing that starts like the
Yeah,
whole thing.
the whole thing, whatever the spark is to your story. You go from being like no fire to woof, bonfire.
Well, kind of like if you're going, if like for example, from like in Pokemon, the hook is like getting your first Pokemon.
Yeah, getting your first Pokemon, being like, cool, I'm gonna start becoming a Pokemon trainer. That is absolutely the hook for the whole entire like games and series. Then you have the first pinch point. This is when the stakes are raised. This is when things get a little bit more intense. Typically, this is where the villain is at least introduced. You don't necessarily have to have them like actually do evil things, but they at least know of them. So, for example, with this in Harry Potter, I would say this is about the moment when everyone's like, "You have the cool mark on your forehead. That's Voldemort," and he's all like, "Oh." So you don't meet Voldemort, but you start to hear about Voldemort, right? You start to know he exists and could be a problem. Then you have the midpoint. This is the point of no return. This is when the character decides to change and start acting instead of just reacting, and they want to actually move forward. Typically, before this point, you want to have your character reacting to things around them, and then at the midpoint, they're like, "No, I'm gonna actually do something about this." This is to the book. This is the point in the first Harry Potter book where he's like, "No, you know what? If Quirrell's evil, I'm gonna go prove he's evil. I'm gonna do something about this instead of just existing." Then you have the pinch point number 2. So okay, we missed plot point number 1 in here, but that's okay. So plot point number 1 typically comes right after pinch point number 1. This is typically when you have more things introduced to make the stakes get a little bit raised, a little bit even more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It vanished.
I said plot turn one.
Ah, gotcha.
Right?
That's okay. That's okay.
I didn't miss it.
It was just in weird, funky writing, so I couldn't quite tell what it was. But anyway,
It
Kinda is a plot turn.
right, it is a plot turn. I would agree.
probably said something like that when I was reading it and writing it down, so my brain
And that's okay.
got confused.
My brain just also got confused. Anyway, so then you have the pinch point. This typically brings it into a more extreme event or dire situation. This is probably in the Harry Potter series, I would say, when they enter the actual like dungeon and realize that someone else is already trying to get in there. They're like, "Oh shoot, we can't just like casually walk through this. We gotta go because someone else is already trying to get in there. Because Fluffy's already asleep and everything." Then you have the next plot point number 2. This is typically when the climax happens. So it's not typically the middle, actually. The middle is when it starts to move towards it, but not quite. This is when you have any sort of tools or secrets that are necessary to win the battle. This is when you get more information. In this case, this is when he realizes, "Oh no, it's not Quirrell, and guess what? I also have the power of my mother's love on my side," and it burns his face.
Wait, don't you mean Snape? Because he thought it was Snape.
He did think it was Snape. That is true. You are right.
mixed
Spoilers.
up Quirrell.
My
It
bad.
was
I mixed it
Quirrell.
up.
It was Quirrell.
It was Quirrell. He mixed it up with Snape. Sorry, my bad. It's been a while since I've watched or read it. Can you tell? Then with the
I read it
resolution,
last year,
then with the resolution, this is typically concludes the story. Whatever you need to conclude it, whether it is them defeating the villain, whether it is them learning something new about the villain and the villain escapes or something like that. Just in general, wrapping things up. With the plotting earlier, I mentioned that each book should have its own, but then the series should have its own. So, for example, with Harry Potter, the first book, the whole point is he starts going to school and starts learning about Voldemort. That is literally the hook of the whole series. And then each book from then on has at least one plot point leading up to that. That's why a lot of people consider the 6th book to be the most intense, because technically that is the climax of the series. Even though he hasn't fought Voldemort yet, it is the climax of the series because of the fact that he's gaining all the tools and the secrets he needs in order to win in book 7. And so up all of that build up in book 6. And so with that being said, pulling that all together can be hard sometimes, especially if you aren't necessarily a plotter. That's why I'd recommend, if you aren't a plotter, plot it in post. Like, finish writing everything, don't worry about plot, don't give a darn about plot, just throw it out the window. Then, when you finish, look at it and go, do I have all 7 points? And also, do they match up? For example, if your plot, thank you for this. If your plot tends to center around political intrigue, and then all of a sudden at the end, the thing that makes it all come together and is the climax is a big battle, that doesn't fit. However, if you have them like periodically fighting the villains on and off, and then a big battle happens, that fits. Or if you have, for example, on again, off again, lovers and romance and all these things, and then it's like the climax is again a battle. It's like, wait, this is a romance. So this is when you can also make sure that the subplot doesn't eat the main plot. Yep. They go nyam nyam, and then your main plot died because it got eaten. You want to make sure that does not happen. That you aren't either missing stuff or that your subplot just went tasty and ate your main plot. Did that kind of answer your question? Okay, cool. Any other questions about writing in general, whether it be plotting, characters, getting published, anything?
Wait, what
Yes.
is the like subplot? What's an example of a subplot?
Great question. An example of subplot, if I was to give best example, with Pokemon, I would say a great example of the subplot is them becoming better and better friends and learning more and more about each other as friends. The main plot obviously is them becoming Pokemon trainers, right? And them learning more about Pokemon.
How Ash getting more gym badges.
Yeah, or Ash getting more gym badges. But the subplot is them becoming friends, them getting better friends, and becoming to know each other more as a group.
What about catching more Pokemon? Is that more of a
That's
main
more of
or
a main
sub?
plot because of the fact
Yeah.
that it helps him to get more gym badges.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and things like that. With subplots and main plots, there's a bunch of other examples I could also give. For example, with Harry Potter, the main plot is him obviously trying to stop Voldemort in whatever way that is, within whatever book it is. However, the subplot is him going to school and learning more about magic and bonding with his friends. Or you can even have different things like action movies that have like all of this plot around we gotta stop the bomb from going off or something crazy like that. But then it'll have a subplot of like, and there's this really hot spy girl, and I have a crush on her. And then you have romance. Or then you have like Avatar The Last Airbender. There absolutely is a subplot of not only friendship and bonding, but also romance between him and his crush on Katara. And so that is very much a subplot to the main plot, which is destroy the Fire Lord because he's trying to kill everyone.
Because he went cuckoo,
Yep.
cuckoo.
He's nuts. So typically the main plot is what they are working towards the whole series, and the subplot is what they are working towards in that little book. Tiny book. Yeah. The baby goal versus the big goal. And then if the baby goal eats the mama goal, you have problems.
A big problem. Because
What are you talking about gold like?
it shouldn't be big enough to eat. The baby should not be
Exactly. Should not be
big enough
able to do that.
big enough to eat the big giant goal.
Exactly. And so as a result, if that has been happening, you need to figure out how to rewrite it so it's not eating it. It shouldn't be overwhelming it. It should be the adorable side plot. It shouldn't be becoming the king of all plots and eating your main plot. All right. Other questions about plotting, characters, publishing, world building? Okay, cool. We have one person who's good on questions. Anyone
Wait,
else
who is
who's done with questions?
Oh.
Anyone else who's like good on questions, doesn't have any more questions? Just give me like a little thumbs up. Cool. Cool. Feeling good on questions?
I don't know.
That's okay. I don't know is an acceptable answer too. I'm gonna assume Archer's done considering he's building a pillow fort. All right, we're gonna call that good for today and wrap things up. However, I'm also just gonna make obviously quick announcements about what story contests and whatnot are coming up next. Yes, hello. So the next story contest that is coming up is the scary story contest. There's no prompt for that. It is simply write a story that is scary. super simple. Nothing crazy. I will say we also do allow humorous, scary stories. So even if it's just like the whole thing is that they're a children's book where he's like, I want to wash and wipe the windows, and it's a vampire. Blah blah blah. That joke, that we would count that because it's got a scary theme, even if it isn't scary. So it's okay to be humorous. I know that one year, for instance, I submitted something where it was a choose your own story, and one ending was like super scary, and one ending was like literally you just like trip and fall and you're fine. And like, and then there was another ending where you met a hobo and played go fish with him. So
What's a hobo?
Someone who does not currently have a home or is living in a home that is not legally theirs.
Oh, like illegal immigrants?
Not necessarily. Illegal immigrants can and usually do have legal homes. But anyway,
Okay, how's it legal if they're
because typically they fake their papers. Hobos typically like could legally get a home but can't afford one. But anyway, moving forward. Point being is that I was trying to be silly and goofy because I know a lot of haunted houses typically are all the spooky scary, and I was like, what if you just got scared because there's this guy living in here that you didn't know lived in here? But then he's chill and he plays go fish with you. So like, you can have silly things like that as long as there's an overarching scary motif to it. Motif just kind of is another way of saying theme. Um, And then that one is 1,500 word limit. I know it's really short, but like I've said before, we have tons of entries for the scary story contest. If we made it any longer, we'd probably just perish from too much reading, or we'd have to make the like announcement for when people won like way far away, and then you'd be like, "So we're announcing the scary story winner in December." That would be bad. So in order to make the time between reading and announcing shorter, as well as make sure that we don't die, we have to make it 1,500 words. That's the longest we all agreed we can make it, which is still longer than last year, though. So woo, you have a whole 300 words more than last year. Moving forward, the next contest after that, starting in November, will be the first chapter contest. As long as it is less than 3,000 words, we are okay with that because currently we have no more than about 25 people entering most of the time for those. So as a result, we can afford to have them be a little longer, which is nice. With that one, as long as it's a first chapter, we don't care what genre, we don't care anything else. The only stipulation that we have is no fan fiction. That's purely just because of the fact that we want it to be your own original concept and work with your own original characters and world. Again, that is mainly just because it's a first chapter contest for your own original work. Nothing against fan fiction. Fan fiction is awesome. We don't say no fan fiction in any other categories, so you're welcome to do fan fiction in other categories. Just know you might be docked a few points in the originality category because of the fact that it's not as original if it's not your own stuff, but that's okay. By all means, if it's good writing, submit it. I don't care. We had someone who submitted fan fiction one time and they did good enough, I believe, to get an honorable mention. So, like, it's okay. It's just that for the first chapter contest specifically, we don't want fan fiction. That's it. Then in January, we will be doing the Winter Romance Contest. That one will be write a romance that takes place during the winter holidays. When we say winter holidays, we mean any holiday that takes place between December and January. You can have it be any holiday you want from any culture or time period that you want.
What about Valentine's Day? Valentine's Day is in winter.
I know. I discussed it with my other graders and they all agreed it didn't count, even though I thought it should count. I got outvoted. So Valentine's Day does not count. So anyway, I got outvoted. So unfortunately for you guys, it is usually considered spring, even though technically it is during winter. So I think that's why we got outvoted.
It's like a month. It's like a.
It's technically a month before spring, but anyway. The point is, it was convoluted enough that my other coworkers wanted to cut it off. So, as a result, it's anything through January or December. And like I said, any culture, any time period. So you can even do ancient holidays like Yule or things like that that don't technically exist anymore or something like that. You can do whatever you want. as long as it is within January and December. If you do decide to do Valentine's Day, just keep in mind, because our prompt officially says no Valentine's Day, you will be docked points. So you still technically can do it, just know you will be docked points. And then in March through May, we have our Spring Fantasy Contest. That one is going to be create a myth surrounding spring. So any kind of myth that you want, you can have it be the story of how this specific flower blossoms. You could have it be the story of how spring comes together in your fantasy world. You can have it be the story of how the first bunnies were created. I don't know. Whatever springish, whatever springish type of theme you want to have that is fantasy related for your world building. What does your world look like in spring? How does spring come about in your fantasy religion and beliefs? Then for summer, last but not least, it is going to be a short story that we have no specifications on genre or anything like that. The only specification is they have to, during the story, have the main plot be about and surrounding unearthing bones of some sort. They can be fantasy bones, they can be alien bones, they can be giant bug bones. I don't know. But we did say giant bug exoskeleton would count, so even though they don't have bones, we would count it. And like, or it could be animal, or it could be murder mystery and be a human. Like whatever you want. Go crazy.
But it's around like a year from now. Why are you introducing it?
Because a lot of people do tend to like to get started early and actually really appreciate it. So I'm sorry you don't appreciate it, but a lot of people actually really do.
I just feel like a year before is too much. I feel like if it was winter, it would be okay.
But anyway, so moving forward,
not even fall.
moving forward, every fall we will now have the first chapter contest. So keep that in mind. That will for sure be the same every year. So, there's that. Nice to know. And then as far as everything else goes, I think that is it for major writing events coming up as far as I'm aware. I will let you guys know if there's anything else that you guys need to be aware of, but currently I believe that is all.